Hey, all. Hope you're staying warm out there. I certainly am. The weather is kind of crazy right now. I wanted to talk about. I was streaming on my YouTube channel and on Twitch. I was streaming Final Fantasy VII. Really enjoying the game up to a certain point, and because of life circumstances and just kind of me as a person, who I am, a mix between burnout and some other things, I stopped streaming. But I did finish Final Fantasy VII off camera. And it's an interesting game, and I wanted to talk about it because, to give you my history with RPGs in general, when I was growing up, I played Skyrim, and that's about it. Pretty much just Skyrim. And then in high school, I met my friend Caleb, and he's super big into RPGs, and he got me into one or two and convinced me to play a few. Up to now, I think a rough list of RPGs I've played. I played Witcher 3, I played Skyrim, like I said. I played Witcher 2 and 1 as well. I hate Witcher 1. Witcher 2 is pretty good. Witcher 3 is pretty awesome. I played Xenoblade 3, and then Xenoblade 1, rather. I played a smattering of other RPGs. But a year or two ago, me and Caleb were both interested in FF7 Remake. So we played through that, and I freaking loved it. It's my first experience with anything FF7 related besides Cloud and Sephiroth and Smash Bros. I knew a little bit about the game, sort of going in, but not much, and I love the game. FF7 Remake is not only, like, probably the best RPG I've played, it's one of my personal favorite games of all time at this point. I love it. It's fantastic. But with Rebirth coming up as of today, like what, a month or so, I really like watching the trailers, listening to people talk like Maximilian Dude and other big Final Fantasy people. The more and more I and my friend Caleb realized, like, wow, we really need to play original FF7, otherwise FF7 Rebirth was probably going to not make sense at a certain point. So obviously a couple months ago, started it up on stream, played through a little bit of it, tried to get regular FF7 running with translation mod. I forget which translation mod I originally tried to get working. That didn't work at all. But through a series of events, I found another mod manager, Seventh Heaven, downloaded like the new threat mod and then a bunch of graphical enhancements, because I'm like, I like the original graphics. I think they're good for the time. But why wouldn't I just rock these nicer textures and everything? I did keep the original soundtrack though. The original soundtrack was very important for me to keep. So I did that, started making my way through the game, enjoyed it. I started feeling like, man, I really wish this had voice acting. And I'd heard about, someone jumped into my stream at one point and mentioned a voice acting mod. I looked into it. It actually seemed decent. Like actually really decent voice acting for what it is, which I don't know the history of it, but I've kind of been under the assumption it's a bunch of fans just like, we love this game. So we're gonna make a voice acting mod of it.
Hey, that's Cloud's line. It's too dangerous. I can't let you get involved. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's a little late for that now.
We found out what happened and asked to come down here. Come on, Barrett. We need to know what's bothering you.
Guys, we heard that the murders at the battle arena were caused by a man with a gun on his arm. Was it you?
There's another man with a gun on his arm. It was 4 years ago.
So I downloaded that, and then that's how I played the rest of the game. I say all this, and I set all this up because growing up, my perception of FF7, right? Like I said, I started off playing Skyrim, so I don't have a ton of traditional RPG experience, if that makes sense. I don't have a ton of it. But growing up, my perception around it, because of the internet, is like, this is the greatest, most quintessential JRPG of all time. There's no competition. It is just the best. So, and I'm a big fan of Maximilian Dude. I'm a big fan of Some Call Me Johnny, and they both like can't speak enough praises of the game. And I'm like, I tend to not completely agree with their opinions, but I tend to at least fall somewhere close to their opinions on a lot of games. So going into it, I was really excited. I was like, man, I'm about to participate in like a really big experience. Something everyone's like, hey, this is it. This is the game. And I get through Midgar, which is what the events of FF7 Remake cover. And I'm like, this was good. This was really good. But I feel like what Remake did is what original FF7 was trying to be. So I really, like, you get through all of Midgar, and it's like, in original FF7, I don't care that Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge die. Like, just not at all. The original FF7 doesn't make me care any for the fact that these characters just died, besides the fact that Barrett cares. It's about it. And that was like one of the major areas where I was like, man, FF7 Remake just felt like FF7 Remake did this better. And I'm not even talking about like graphics or gameplay or anything at this point, just from a pure writing perspective. Like, I don't feel like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge were really characters in original 7. They just kind of exist. They're just kind of there. And then they're not. Like, they just die. And then they're not there. And it's like, okay. Well, that had a lot more emotional impact in 7 Remake. And I think that's going to be probably one of my biggest takeaways, and one of the biggest takeaways I want to kind of convey in this video, is that really by the end of original FF7, I feel like what the remakes they're making is what they originally wanted FF7 to be. And they didn't have the technology to do it at the time. Like, one of the bigger reasons why I started feeling a certain amount of burnout from streaming is I was sitting there, I was like, man, this middle section of FF7's pretty rough. Like, from the point after you get on the boat heading to the coastal town, I forget its name, I'll throw it up on screen. After that point, until you get to Temple of the Ancients, the game gets pretty rough. It gets pretty slow. There's only so much of go to town, where's Sephiroth? Go to town, where's Sephiroth? With character exposition in between, because you get Barrett's backstory with Dyne and everything that happened there, and why Barrett's kind of the way he is. You get all the stuff with Red 13. You get all the stuff with Red 13, Nanaki, and that's interesting, and I appreciate the extra character exposition, but it's just the game starts losing me. Like, its overarching narrative completely takes a backseat for a while, and I'm just like, ooh, this is kind of boring. This is kind of boring. So you get through all that, and then you finally you get to the Temple of the Ancients at like the start of the final third of the game, right? Because the way I look at it in my mind is that Midgar is kind of Act 1. The whole middle section between leaving Midgar and getting to the Temple of the Ancients is Act 2, and then Act 3 is Temple of the Ancients onward. I haven't fully looked at the actual writing to know if I'm like technically correct, but that's just kind of how my mind looks at the whole thing. By the time I got to the Temple of the Ancients, I was sitting there, I was like, man, if this game doesn't hook me here, I like it well enough, but to me it's like a solid 6 out of 10 game, mostly because I don't like the gameplay, which I'll get into that later. So I get to the Temple of the Ancients finally, and the game like finally starts hitting me with that, you finally catch up to Sephiroth. You kind of find out what he's looking for. He's looking for the black materia, which can summon Meteor. Cloud loses his marbles, like, totally and completely, which is like, okay, finally, they're following through on all this weirdness they've set up previously. Of like, Cloud's telling this story about what happened between him and Sephiroth, but things aren't adding up. And so they finally get to that, and I'm like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're doing things. We're kind of moving. We're kind of hopping now. And so from that point onward, I won't go into every detail of the story from that point onward, but finally I was starting to understand. I was like, man, this is starting to make sense why people like this so much. Because I feel like for the time, this narrative had to have been pretty impressive. And I think the highest moment of the game for me, completely, was Tifa and Cloud falling into the live stream together, and like Tifa having to help Cloud like unravel his mind and finally get back to the truth of what actually happened 5 years previously. So I think overall, by the end of it, I really liked FF7's story, and I really like most of FF7's characters. But the problem is, I think I wouldn't like the characters half as much if I hadn't played Remake first. And obviously, something that absolutely has to be said is, hey, you know, Remake was made in 2020, 21 years or so after 7 came out. This game has there's a lot of time between then and now. And that's true, and that's fair. I think the game has a people hyping it up problem. Because when I was pitched the game by people, it was pitched to me as, this game is incredible. This is one of the greatest games of all time. Not only did it hold up then, it holds up now. And I think by the end of the game, I think that perception that I had walking into it hurt my experience. I got a little bit duped by people who are really into the game and really liked it back in the day and have that nostalgia. I loved this back then, and I think it's just like a near perfect game, which that's fair. I have my games that I grew up with, and I'm like, yeah, I think these are near perfect games that when I look at objectively, I kind of sit there and I go, I don't know. I don't know if they're all that, truthfully, but I like them that much. So that's fine. I think the game has a hyped up problem for me. And I think finally, the final thing that really killed the game for me is, like I said earlier, man, the gameplay felt simple. Like, really simple. So I played some of the game vanilla, like unmodded, because I realized I had this was by accident, this was by pure accident. I realized I had some of my mods set up incorrectly, so I wasn't using the new threat mod. I was just playing the vanilla gameplay experience for part of the time. And that was pretty boring. I find that the game generally boils down to regular enemies, and random encounters boil down to spam the attack button until they die, run into a boss, sense it, figure out what its weakness is, and then spam spells to trigger that weakness and win. So you're either spamming or full novaing, and it just kind of boils down to this is either really boring or really tedious, and tedium is boring. So I download the new threat mod, and I'm hoping in the moment I'm hoping, man, maybe this will help. Maybe the game being more difficult, it'll make me strategize more, and I'll have to make character builds and stuff. And I'm like, nope, no, it's pretty much the same gameplay no matter what. So I eventually got to the point where I was talking to Caleb about it, and he was like, and we were both like, man, we kind of just want to get through the story at this point. Like, the story's worth it, but the gameplay is just not it for me at all. And making materia builds and stuff just isn't that interesting. And in order to make it interesting, I'd have to grind so much that the game would become even more infuriating to me. So we were both like, okay, so neither of us care about the gameplay at all. So we cheat engined it just completely. We made ourselves like max level so that we couldn't lose, just so we could as quickly as possible bounce through the story. And that honestly helped my enjoyment more than anything else. Like, because I'd rather have boring gameplay that isn't tedious than tedious boring gameplay. So cutting the tedium helped, and that's how I made it through the final third of the game. Pretty much was like, I just decided, man, this is not worth me trying to legitimately beat this game anymore, because I just don't enjoy it. I know I could legitimately beat the game, but it's just boring, and I have better things to do with my time. So that's how we beat it. And I think, I will most likely have this in the thumbnail of the video. I give this game like a solid 7 out of 10. I think it's an excellent game for its time. I think it's really held back by its gameplay and a really, really, really boring middle section. The middle section of this game is rough. Like, really rough. I don't know. I don't think the narrative needed to take that much of a backseat while they did character exposition side quests. But, that's just me. I want to cap off this video by asking a question, though. Because something me and Caleb have talked about, and something I've been thinking about on my own time, was I wonder, because this game has a reputation. It has a big reputation. It had a big enough reputation that me, in my younger years, primarily being a first-person shooter guy, not really an RPG guy at all, it had a big enough reputation to kind of reach me at that point. And people were saying, hey, FF7 is great. It is one of the most well-received games of all time. But there's other games out there that I haven't played, and I know a lot of other people have. The main ones that come to mind when people bring up the greatest classic JRPGs of all time, at least in my experience, you have Final Fantasy VII, Golden Sun, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. Those are the main ones that I have found get brought up the most in terms of what is the most incredible, well-received, critically acclaimed JRPG back in the 90s and late 80s. Those are the ones I hear about. And I'm curious, does FF7 deserve the spotlight above all of them? Now, and if you have an opinion on that, I'd love to hear it in the comments, because I'd be curious to start getting a actual consensus for what people kind of think about this. Because I'm curious, and it's I don't know if it's a big discourse online or not. I know nerds love to compare games to other games. So, do that in the comments if you don't mind, because I'm curious to hear it. I think I loved FF7, but I loved it because of how much I loved FF7 Remake. And I love it because I think the bones of the story that FF7 tells are incredible. And I think with Remake and Rebirth and probably FF7 Reunion or some other R name at the end of it for the third and theoretically final part of the remake series, I think by the end of that like probably 150 hour experience to fully complete and beat, I think that will be what FF7 always wanted to be back in 1990 something. I forget what year. I'll put it on screen. Back then, I think it will, the remake trilogy or however many games it ends up being, will be what FF7 always wanted to be originally. But yeah, let me know what do you guys think of FF7 and its reputation compared to its peers? Because that's what I ended up being most curious about by the end of FF7. How is a game so critically acclaimed? How did I walk away from a game that is that critically acclaimed saying, you know, it's a good game, but it lives up to its name? It's a 7 out of 10 to me, which is good. It's a good game. I don't rate, you know, I don't have a rating scale that doesn't go below 5. There's plenty of below 5 games I've played, but 5 is average. 7 is decently above average. 8 is excellent. 9 is very good, and 10 is like, it's perfect. There's not a better game that I've played. But 7 just kind of sits in this, it's better than average, but it's not as, to me, it doesn't feel as good as everyone else said it was. So yeah, let me know. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you all later. See ya.